So today I'm going to explain how we went from, hey Matt, we need music for this game, to I started writing it for about 2 weeks, to then implementing it in FMod, then in the game, and then going back and doing some extra little sections here and there. So what, at least in the case of my project is Alchemist, because I'm sure for a lot of things there will be some differences, but I'll try and explain. Sometimes I'll explain a bit how it can be done, like in a different way, but I'm going to mainly focus on how it was done for this game in particular. So for us, it was quite simple. We had the game. We knew what it was. We knew the map. We knew the vague story. And we knew vaguely what musics we wanted. So we know we wanted different map regions. We know we wanted a main theme for like the main menu and for most of the story places. And we knew we wanted different small music sections for the different story sections. So something that was a bit like a bit of a tension one, or something that was like a happy one, or something that was a silly one or goofy one. We always knew that everything was going to be a bit lighthearted, so it was going to always be more like this fun vibe rather than a doom and gloom, or like our previous project, Out of Managery, the music was much more doom and gloom because it was a bit of a, it was a cursed island that you're trying to where people went missing, right? Where here is like the story was always meant to be a bit fun, and there wasn't going to be that many moments that were sad, which means that in the music there isn't that many sad ones. There's a couple, but not that many. But anyway, so that Luke and Lydia were like, okay, we need these musics, please make them. So that's the game. So what I do is I take the game and I start writing on the piano. I just try and come up with things that would work. In this case, I actually went to my brother's house, who has a lot more equipment for audio recording. And I was there for 2 weeks, and I just cracked most of the music out in those 2 weeks. And what I did is just had a big piano, and I would try things out. And he actually helped me a lot, because I'm much better at writing relatively sad things than I am at writing like these much more joyful things that you needed for this project. So he helped me out. He gave me a couple of like, oh, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? And some of them worked really well. And so yeah, so that is all done on, at least for me, I played a lot of piano, and I find composing on piano the easiest, so I always do it on the piano. Then you go to recording it. Now, to record music, you need what's called a DAW, or a digital audio workstation. DAWs are basically the Unity but of making audio, or like the Pro Tools of making audio. It's where you will put things together, render them out, have different effects on them, whatever. To record music, you can do it in 2 ways. The most simple way is just take a microphone and record. That is what I'm going to call direct recording. I'm going to call it DR because it's less long to write. Direct recording I quite like it because it's pretty cool, but it's much more complicated because you need a bunch more instruments. You need to get the right rooms in the right places where there's not any background audio. It can be quite messy if you're not in a controlled environment. So for some big studios, like they might get an orchestra together and have like these proper rooms, recording rooms and all that. That is perfect, right? But for a lot of smaller studios or indie studios like us, it's much easier and much cheaper to go with the MIDI route. Now MIDI is a bit like if you recorded, so let's take an analogy, a classic Matthew analogy. Like directly recording stuff is a bit like if you're playing a game and you just recorded your screen. MIDI is a bit like if you were playing a game and we're recording your inputs. So MIDI is basically you record like, oh, I press this note at this time on this keyboard kind of thing, with this much intensity. Now it's quite nice to do MIDI because it means that you need no physical instruments other than a keyboard to record the MIDI inputs. And these MIDI inputs can then be translated in the DAW to different instruments. So anybody who wants to do this, I recommend the Labs instruments and the BBC Orchestra instruments that you can find online. They're both free and they're both amazing. And that will allow you to have a whole bunch of sounds. All the game's music is made with basically those 2 instruments alone. Now I say instruments there, both the Labs and the BBC Orchestra have several different instruments, like sound things that you can call. I don't know why they're called instruments, it makes them very confusing, but that's what they're called. So you can have, there's lots of different instruments inside these basically packages of instruments that allow you to have lots of different sounds and to make music like what's made here. You also have other effects, so you can have like there's what's it called? There's basically you can add effects to your different tracks in your DAWs, and some of them can, like the most common one I have on every track actually is reverb. It's just some reverb that allows it to have just fills up a bit more space and makes it feel more like meshed together. For quite a few tracks, there's quite a small amount of reverb, and you won't necessarily hear it. But for quite a few of them, there's a bit more, and you can play with that as you go along. But anyway, so I've done MIDI, and I like MIDI, and it's great. And it also means that you can kind of record, you can make lots of very nice things. There's also it's how one person can make tracks like this very easily. After this, you render out the different files. So here you're like, okay, you make the song, and then you render out each section separately. I'm going to call them audio files. Was my beautiful handwriting. So these audio files, you'll then, once you've made the music, you'll then render out a whole bunch of audio files. You can do it differently, but I'll get to that later. So you render out these audio files, and you don't render out each song. You render out each part of each song. Now, the reason you do this is because it's a game, and you want the music to be adaptive to the player. So, I'll come to some examples later, but, in the quest scene, if you pick one character over another, you want that character's music, that character's instrument to come in and not the other. So anyway, you record out these audio files, and then you take these audio files and you go to FMod. Or you can also go, there's other programs that do the same thing. We use FMod. You can use Wise, is another very common one that I've seen in lots of places. If you actually look for these at quite a few games when they launch, they'll have like the Unity logo, but they also might have like an FMod logo or a Wise logo. As I said, they're the two most common ones. So FMod is pretty cool, and it's what I'm going to be focusing on today when we look at more specifics about the music, because it's a nice way to just show what I mean. So you take the audio files and you put the track back together in FMod, basically. And then a lot of the work in FMod is creating parameters. So parameters are what allows me... Jesus Christ, I cannot write. You know what? I'm going to cheat. Parameters. Perfect. Parameters are what allows you to go from just a normal song to a song that does things through code, right? So like with parameters, I can fade in or fade out different instruments. I can change the pitch. I can add certain effects like reverb or like a high pass or a low pass. And we'll see some examples of this when I get to the FMod section. So that's the main thing that FMod is good at, is adding these things to the music in the game. And then FMod also deals with, we also use FMod for all that is sound effects and atmospheres. I won't look too much into that today because I think it's slightly less interesting, but it's also not really my area of expertise. But FMod does that entire thing. And then you build out FMod and you get a build of FMod. I've gone back to my handwriting. And you take it to Unity. And that is the somewhat the last step. So Unity is obviously our game engine. It's what we make the game in. And we take the FMod build, we put it in Unity, Unity updates, and then we have access to all the different events and all the different parameters that we made in FMod. And so we can change those parameters through some very basic code in Unity. I've done things in such a way that I've got an audio handler, which basically handles all of that. So if I want to do something with the audio, I will call a function on the audio handler that is already made to do that. And what's quite nice about that is I can take that same audio handler file and like basically import it to every project we do, because a few things change. Usually I just updating things because I've realized I want to do slightly more complicated things, but it's basically always the same. Like I'm changing a parameter here because most of the heavy lifting of this comes on the FMod side. So that is the overarching like structure. I hope my beautiful paint drawing is vaguely understandable. Do not hesitate to ask questions if I'm going too fast, or if it's too complicated, or if I glossed over things that you think you want more information about. I am very much aware that I have a tendency to just kind of skip over what, because I know the thing quite well, I kind of will skip over certain things that I'm not used to explaining. Anyway, so why don't we have a look at the FMod side of things, and I'll show you what it looks like. So let me transition. The music will stop. I apologize. There you go. It should be back, but I'm actually going to stop it anyway, because time for some FMod music. So this is FMod. Ooh. You can see up here, it's probably the most important tabs here. Assets are the files. So these are literally the audio files that we created for the music in our DAW, right? So if I just take the main theme MT1 and play it, you will see, it might be a bit loud, I'm sorry, actually. Sorry, I'm going to change the volume of that before I play it. Well, I know I've already played it, but that hopefully is... Why did I choose FMod? Honestly, I think I mostly chose it out of familiarity. Because we did a bit of FMod at uni, and so I already had some knowledge of how it worked, and there was also some very good examples of FMod. So Celeste famously used FMod, and there's actually, I'm not sure you still can, but I think you can actually get the Celeste FMod project, and that's really useful for me. I find it very useful to learn by example. So having an entire full released games project, like FMod project, to look at and to see how things worked was quite nice. But I think it's mostly that. It's mostly familiarity for me, and also it has a nice integration into Unity as well, which Wise, which is the other one that we considered for a bit, doesn't do as nicely. That may have changed as I said. We kind of started with FMod, and so we stuck with FMod. I do have some complaints because I find the documentation for FMod kind of bad. So when I've got stuck on certain things, it's been quite annoying sometimes to figure out why certain things weren't working or why they weren't working the way I was expected. But I think that's the main reason. Was we did some at uni. I liked it when I did some at uni, and then I had good examples of how it worked, and I knew how to use it, and I knew I could do what I wanted with it. But I'm not. I could see myself changing in the future if there's a good reason to. But as it works for what we want, currently it's what I see. Yeah, so Wise is seems to be industry standard for big studios, or at least it's what I've seen the most for big studios. And yeah, it can do a lot of the same things, and in fact it does a lot of the same things very well, but it seems to be less friendly towards just getting yourself started, at least from what I've seen. But to be fair, I haven't gone into it much, so that is why we chose FMod. But yeah, so these are the files. So you can see this is what's been playing in the background is just the base of the main theme as the audio file. So it's not particularly, but you can see the main theme has 12 files, well, 13, 13 different files that I have got. Then there's the events. So the events are basically, let me go to the main theme. The events are basically just, what is playing. So you'll play an event. So here, my event is just the main theme. So if I put the volume music on, you can see it will play the main theme. And here are my parameters. So here's what I can change through the Unity script, and then here are all the different tracks, and these are all different audio files. And you can see, this is the MT1 we were listening to right before. This is the bass. Now, I will say it tends to be a good idea to try and group up, to not have as many tracks as I do. So it tends to be a good idea to try and have as few tracks as possible and just have tracks where you have things that can change. Here, because we have 9 characters and every character has their instrument, I kind of need to have at least 9 different tracks. And then I've got some other stuff that's in there too. So that's why I have so many. The main theme is one of the ones I have the most on, just because there's a lot that comes into there. But yeah, so it's really quite neat because it means that, like, you know, when you're in FMod, you're working and you can set up these parameters. So now I've just added alineas, which is this one, and you can see that I've setting this thing changes that white bar there, and this is the volume. This being the normal volume, this being quiet, this being loud. So if I want, I can make a linear very loud. Or I can make her very quiet. And that's really cool. I really like this, and it's really useful for this project because we've got 9 characters, and I thought when I made the music, each character will be represented by an instrument. To an extent, the player is 2, so that the melody, this instrument here, kind of represents the player. I say kind of because it's almost always playing. There's very few scenes where I actually remove it, and it was made with the idea that represents the player, but I can't remove it easily because it's the main melody, if that makes sense. So it's usually just playing regardless. But still, as you're the player and you're always playing the game, it doesn't feel that crazy. But yes, but yeah, I'm quite happy with the main theme. It's simple, it works, and you can add, you know, people in as you wish. You might notice that, okay, I've got volume Alenia, volume Orin, volume Axel, etc, etc, etc. But I also have at the bottom here 2 extra things. Now, a lot of these songs I made the 9 different sections for each character with the bass section, and then as we developed the project, I realized, hey, wait, I need this song but slightly different, or like I need to add a certain effect somewhere. So I think a really good example of that is probably the pre-quest. So if I go to the pre-quest, this is when you're choosing characters, right? I think this is a really good example because the bass music is really simple, right? It's kind of like a waiting room vibe, which is kind of what I was going for. It's like, you know, you're preparing stuff, not much is happening. You know, when you choose a character, you add the instrument. I'll add the bayers, why not? You know, you add the instrument, and that's, you know, it's especially this is one of the few times where like a button click on the player immediately goes to a parameter. In this case, you know, the volume of them coming in. Most songs, the things will come in and flow out depending on either the story or seemingly at random or like on bigger things, so it won't change as obviously. Like it will change as you load into a scene, and so it won't necessarily be obvious that it's just added something or things like that. But the reason I wanted to go here is that, as I said, some of the audio stuff have extra things. In this case, sometimes we have boss fights in this game, and to make the boss fights feel more impactful, I've done the same thing. I've added an instrument that can fade in for boss fights. In this case, I'll put it to 2 so we can hear better. But it's this string here. This is like an extra string to like make the song more like kind of worrying almost. I've often used string, like these long low strings, to represent danger or something that's wrong, or some dangers. They're very common in Act 3 stuff, so I won't talk too much about what it's trying to represent because I don't want to spoil anything. But the strings are usually something that's a bit more representing worry, and I mean these very low strings, because you also have, you know, you also have Orim's strings, which are the high strings, which there's just Orim. These very low strings, they tend to represent danger. I also have another boss thing. So sometimes I want variation, because there's a lot of bosses, right? So you don't have just one thing that comes on for every boss. You want each boss to be slightly different. So I've got a second one. And this one's a bit harder to like hear. I think it's this one. I'll put it at 2 again as well. This one is used for me. I've made this represent demons, basically. So whenever you interact with demons, this is most likely playing somewhere. So that's why with the demon boss fights, you will have this sound effect. It's kind of it's another danger one, but a demon danger specifically. And it's actually pretty cool because the talking of the demon characters will have some of this in the background as well, just because I thought that was kind of cool. So yeah, so that's what you can do things like that. But one of the reasons why I wanted to show you this song specifically compared to some of the other ones, sorry, I've got cables everywhere, is that I can also, on this song, change the pitch. So for one of the demon fights, the last one of the beta, the song actually sounds a bit more like this, if I'm not mistaken. Well, wait for it to get there. The song's a bit more, actually maybe it's not quite this much. I think it's more like this. Can't quite remember the exact value, but it's slowed down. You can tell the pitch has been lowered, everything's a bit slower. It's a bit of an unnatural feel, but you can do this because, and I did on purpose because the last boss of the beta is a sleep demon. So I wanted to make everything feel a bit like slower and sluggisher and like almost like it's struggling to continue, you know, starting to fall asleep, kind of. It probably sounds something actually quite similar to this because I'm pretty sure I have the demon stuff on as well. But that's something else you can do in FMod, is just change the pitch here. And that's pretty cool. And it's really cool. You also, I do this for quite a few things. So obviously I've done it for here. I've also made it go faster for certain fights. And I've done this on different musics as well. It's not just the prequest. Like for example, the combat, the pitch will suddenly shift down and back up whenever you get a crit with Axel. Things like that. Small little details that you can do in FMod, which really do add a lot. And also make things hopefully less repetitive. Because that's one of my worries, is that these songs, for somebody who plays through the game, will be listened to a lot. There's about an hour of music in this, you know, generously. It's probably about an hour of music in this, so you really want to try and vary that up as much as possible so that it becomes, you know, for people who play 10 hours, you don't want it to be repetitive. And a good way to do this is make it constantly change from other things. This prequest is actually one of the few FMod events that has two sections. So you can see here, there's a bit of a gap here, and then there's this. So in FMod, you have these different markers at the top. This is just a loop region. So once I get here, it'll just go back to the start. Simple. This just tells you what tempo and like what kind of tempo it is. Again, relatively self-explanatory. This, however, is a magnet region. Basically, it waits for a certain thing to be true, and then as soon as it is, it brings things towards it. So it just immediately brings things towards it. So why I have this in this scene is because when you embark, I wanted there to be a thing to finish the song off. So what you do is you put this to true, and there you go, you've embarked. And then it has just a fail-safe to make sure that it doesn't replay the same part again. And yeah, that's it. So it's just a nice little way to have a different section that's part of the song and that transitions. It's actually quite hard, or at least I find it quite hard, to make a thing that can be played at any time sound good. And you can actually tell, let me just put this back. You can actually tell that there's certain parts of this that if I put it to true, it will sound a bit odd. Because there's a second part of this, like this, basically this song is in two parts. One that is just this first part, and then there's the second part, which is a slightly different chords. So here, the chords are slightly different. So if I put this to true, okay, that actually works quite well. But it's like it can sometimes, if you get it at the wrong timing, sound a bit odd. Thankfully, I think it works pretty well. Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, no, I like it too. I think it's pretty cool. But it's always hard, as I say, to get it to sound right at any point. Because the thing is, it can transition at any point. It does wait for an eighth of a note, so it won't immediately skip. It'll skip at the next, basically at the next beat almost. But yeah, so I think it's pretty cool, but it can be quite hard. if I go to the combat, I'll actually show something else. So the combat also has similar things, like it has the combat boss, it has a pitch shift, it has a couple of other things. One of the main things it has that's relatively unique is the low pass. So the low pass is is a way to illustrate that the player's on low health, or at least that's what I'm using it for. So if I bring this down, you can hear the music sounds a bit weird. It sounds like it's under a pillow almost, right? So what I've done is when you're below half your health, this will slowly start to go down from 1 all the way down to 0 if you die. And it's another way to like have the music, do something based on the player, have it reinforce those like, oh, you're in danger, right? Just with, you might not even realize it's the music, but I wanted that that feeling to come in, and so this low pass is a very good way to achieve that. Obviously, you can also have the boss one. Here I've only got one thing, but I've got 4 different steps. It can be a bit hard to hear what it does, but you can hear that top part, and the fast, the top part. Well, actually, let me see if I find. Well, there's the drums here, which is kind of hard to hear because they're quite low down. There's this, which is another quite low part. That's a bass. Then there's this, which is on its own sounds kind of bad, but can sound quite nice with everything. And then there's this as well, which again, on its own doesn't sound too good, but with everything can sound quite nice. And yes, you might be wondering why I have pitch shift and quest pitch shifter. The short answer to that is pitch shift. Oops, sorry. Changes the shift pitch, but without changing the tempo. So it'll still be at the same speed, it'll just be lower down. Whereas quest pitch shifter also changes the tempo, so it's a both. And it's just, I don't really need to have both, but I made both, so whatever. It can be quite nice. Sometimes you want to slow down the music, so the quest pitch shifter, also I've called them terrible names, that's just my terrible naming scheme, can be quite useful to have both. You can actually try and do a combination of both to keep it at the same height, but have it go lower down. So like if I want to make it increase the speed but keep the pitch the same, I can use a mixture of both. I find it doesn't work that well. It starts sounding very strange very quickly if you do that, but it can work for small values up and down. Finally, you might notice that for most of my parameters they're local, which means that they're unique to each event, which means if I change event, they'll be reset to 0, they're their own instance. There's one thing, well actually there's a couple, but there's one that you've seen so far, which is a high pitch shift. The reason it's global is just if you pause. If you pause, this goes to 1. And it kind of sounds like it's in a radio. If we had radios, I would use this for radios. For like listening for a radio, because I mean, that's what it sounds like. If you're wondering what high pass and low pass are, they basically, to my understanding, they just cut off all the frequencies above or below a certain point. And it's why you get this, for low pass, it's why you get this kind of snuffled effect, because you're only getting the low frequency sounds that are coming out. And for high pass, it's the inverse. You're only getting the high frequency sounds that are getting passed. And this is just, what frequency. You can see it here, actually, the low pass here. You can see it, that's the frequency underneath the number that is letting pass. Same with the high pass. That's the numbers above that's letting pass. So I think it's a nice little effects here and there. Yeah, I think that's like the main bulk of it from the FMod side. And then I'm gonna talk a little bit more about some of the other things that happen in developments. So when I get the story, when I first made all of these audio files and I first made all of these songs, the story was not written yet. At least it wasn't like, there was a plan, we knew vaguely what was happening in each act, but it was not fully written. And when I've gone through and I've implemented the story into Unity, every so often I'll just go, wait, this, I kind of want to have a unique thing for this. Or like, there's something that's missing here. And often I can just add a parameter add one instrument somewhere and it'll work. But sometimes I need to do something a bit more involved. And so that's when variants come into. So you can see here I've got two of them here. I'm not going to tell you where they come from because I don't want to spoil anything. I mean, you can get a little bit of guess by the name, but that's honestly probably not as helpful as you may think. But for example, let me show you this one. This one is MT, so main theme. So it's a main theme variant, which involves a Chaos Cave. And you can see, you might be able to see why I had to make a variant for this. The song is much slower, but I'm keeping the same pitch, and I've got different parts. And the main melody is on those strings I was talking about earlier. I can also have this part that comes in. I can solve it to make it more obvious, and I can also put on this one. So, spoiler alert, I'm sorry to say, this is something to do with Paya, hence why her volume is there. But yeah, so this is a variant of the main theme. So it may not sound, it's actually probably one of the variants that's the most different. Like, it's not obviously the main theme, but this is the same bass, just slowed down massively in effect, and the melody's been removed to allow this to feel more like I wanted it to feel. I'm trying not to say too much. I've done similar things in other places. Actually, one of the ones I can show are the different outposts. The outposts, they're basically the same theme. So the capital outpost sounds like this. You know, sounds a bit like a dance. It's kind of nice. That's what I wanted. And then I can go to the high beam outpost, which is much the same, but slightly different. I'm pretty sure the high beam outpost is actually just the capital outpost with a couple of extra things in the base. So it's very similar. Also, these parameters, these are for when you start doing things in the outpost. And they are the same in every outpost. And let's just hear the vintage outpost, because this one's definitely the most different. Sounds almost, you add those bells to a song and it just sounds like Christmas. It's it's one of the, you know, one of the tricks in making music. If you add bells, it sounds like Christmas. But yeah, so obviously Winter Dew is snowy land. I don't mind it sounding like Christmas. So I've added those bells. I've also added like kind of like a woo sound. And actually, one of the instruments I've added to the main theme is, you might have noticed, MT Winter. It's because in the story you go into a winter place. So I still wanted to use the main theme, but I wanted it to sound like winter. So I've added this very quiet I'm not sure what to call it, to be honest. But hey, it works. It's quite quiet. I might actually make it slightly louder. But it's just supposed to give that like vague vibe. It works much better when there's, well, it's more clear when there's no other instruments playing. Especially in the gap that's about to come. Honestly, I thought it was more clear than it was. Anyway, there you go. That's how things worked. Luckily for me, I have a portable like MIDI keyboard with me. So if I ever feel like, oh damn, I just really need that one extra thing to a song, or like I want to add an instrument somewhere because I need something more dramatic here, or like I can just plug it in and then make something in a bit. But that's the main that's the main stuff I think I can talk about when it comes to FMod and how the My Party Needs Alchemist music was done. I will say you can do this quite differently. Now, I don't actually know how to do it, and it's possible that we'll try and do it for future projects, But you can actually, instead of using audio files that you render out and then you put into FMod, you can actually use MIDI files and just basically remove the DAW out of the picture and just put everything into FMod. Now, you might not think this has that much advantage because, it probably is harder to work with than what you're used to, but it has some advantages. One of the advantages is if you put the MIDI into FMod, you can have the MIDI create the music at runtime. I said create with big quotation marks. The reason why that could be useful, it means that like if you want to slow things down without changing the pitch, super easy. If you want to have some effects that are much easier to do, that effect in like those Mario games where like you're on a ball and like the music changes speed with how much you roll the ball. Like the pitch doesn't change in that, but you have but I'm almost certain that they probably use a MIDI to do that. To MIDI into like this kind of software, probably not FMod. No idea what Nintendo use, but basically that's the idea. You can do things like that much more easily. So it makes certain things much more easy, but equally, it's probably hard to work with if you don't need to do that kind of things. So depending on the project, it might or might not be more useful for you. But yeah, I think that's mainly what I can show for FMod side of things. So I can quickly. No worries, no worries. Have a nice birthday. I hope you're enjoying yourself. It's fine. It's fine. I can talk about music without anybody interrupting me. Um, so but anyway, I'll go talk about some of the Unity side of things. Unity side of things. Also, do you like my transitions? I think they're beautiful. Unity side of things is relatively simple because of how FMod takes most of the brunt of the work. So I have my audio handler. This is where basically all of the magic happens. I'm going to put some music back on, just so that we have some background music. This audio handler is where, as I said, most of the magic happens. In the inspector, we're not going to see that much, but you can see some things. Let me just put it off. So first of all, this is a list of musics with just a reference to the FMod. So this is just, basically a reference to the FMod. You can see this is... I can't show you on FMod. I will have to change scene. But you get the idea. The instruments are... It depends a little bit what you mean. So they're not real recordings. I haven't recorded like a real piano or a real cello. I have used MIDI. I've used MIDI so that I've not used real recordings. How those MIDI stuff was made I think most of them were probably based on real instruments. So to make instruments, I don't like the fact that they're both called instruments. It makes things very confusing. But basically, when you record in MIDI, you're recording inputs, and the inputs are using instruments to figure out what sound they should make. Those instruments were probably made with physical instruments, at least quite often. So my brother at one point made one of those instruments for MIDI, and what he did, he used one of his guitars, I think, and then just basically slightly did certain things with it in a digital audio software, in a DAW, and then transformed that into an instrument for MIDI, right? So I'm using instruments for MIDI. I don't really know how they were made. I think it's probably some of them were made digitally, and some of them were made with real recordings. But for me, I've not done anything with real recordings myself. Though, hey, if I ever get the funds to do so, I would love to have an orchestra play some of the stuff I make. But I don't think that's for anytime soon, because it's much harder to do direct recording. You need much more equipment, and you need much more people. Except if you know how to play a lot of instruments, which I know how to play a few, but I don't know how to play enough to do that. But I hope that answers your question. But yeah, so coming back to Unity, obviously here these are just references. You might wonder why I do things like this. I like being able to just, in my code, just say play the main theme and just have this enum with all the songs. So this is why I just have the one place where everything's referenced in the audio handler directly, so it's just quicker. But it's, for example, I haven't done that with the sound effects of the atmosphere. So whenever I want to play a sound effect or an atmosphere, I have to reference it directly using this. Basically, I just have to have a reference, which is fine. It's just how I like to do things. I also have a UI list. So for I said with sound effects, I didn't reference it, but for UIs, I do. Again, you could argue that this is a bit weird, but it's just these are sound effects that come up a lot. Like every time you press a button, I don't want every button to be able to have to know the thing when I can just call the audio handler and just say just play the button. You know which one it is. So that's why I've done it this way. The intro song is just what song it plays in the main menu. There you go. The main menu, actually, the song will update with all the characters of your save file. So it figures out, there's a meta save thing which figures out what was your last save file played, and using that it will figure out what instruments to add to the main theme, so that you'll have, like, as you play through the game, you'll have all the instruments of your characters that you've unlocked. I am tempted to show you some of the code, but I'm not sure how interesting that is for you. And also I'd have to create a scene, but I think I can do that. Actually, I don't have to create a scene, I can just cheat. Also, I can make myself visible again. Hello, I'm visible again. I've completely forgot to use this while I was explaining things. Apologies. But equally, I need to keep pressing buttons to use this, so I might actually just make him fade away again. Sorry. I'm having too much fun with him. Let me fade him away. So if I go to let's show you some code. I'll try and keep this quick. I know code is not necessarily the most interesting thing, so I just have to set it up because I, for some reason, didn't do this before the stream. Where is it? Either I'm blind or it's not here. Why are you not here? Okay, I don't know why it's not here. I might not be able to show you code. I apologize. I'll give it. Did I do the wrong thing? I don't think I did. Well, it seems I can't show you Visual Studio. I don't know why it's not propping up. You won't see any of my code. It's probably for the better. Yeah, I think there's not that much to say about the audio handler. I've made it a singleton, which is probably the most wowy thing to say about it. Just Control A, Control C to go to the chat. Control V. Maybe a lot of code, I'll be honest. It is quite long. It's like 700 lines long. That may sound like a lot, and it's because it is, but it's not that. I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of things. You do have to do a bit of setup, which is why I have this audio handler, is that there's quite a few things that you have to do, especially if you want to do things that I want to do, which is like make sure not to play two musics at once or things like that, then you have to do a few things. There's different sections. So in my code, I've got, like, I can play music with different elements. I can change some of the parameters. I can I can like smoothly change the parameters or the music volume. Relatively classic stuff. It's just that because there's a lot of things I want to be able to do, it just becomes very big very quickly. Especially that this file is not only just for music, it's also for all the sound effects and atmospheres, which work slightly differently. If you guys are interested, I can talk about how the atmospheres and sound effects work. Sound effects are very simple, because it's just you have an audio file, you play it, pretty much. I'm simplifying it a bit, but honestly not by that much. Atmospheres are a little bit more complicated because you need to make sure that they can loop on forever, because they're basically like music in the sense that they are always playing and they can loop forever, but they're behind the music. I like to think of it as behind the music, as in the background even backer than the music. But they're slightly different systems because you can have several atmospheres playing at once, whereas you only ever want one music thing playing at once. So that's why those things are different. But yeah, the file is huge. It probably could be simplified, and I'll probably, every time I move a project, I look at this file and change some of it. A lot of it is project only, like for example, all the enum list of each music is just for the music, but it's just for this project, but not always. There's quite a lot of it that can be just copy pasted into new projects. It's actually quite similar to the Steam manage, like how our game talks to Steam. A lot of those functions, they're just I've made a Steam handler that just has a lot of those functions so that I can just rip it for future projects. Means I don't have to write code again, or the same code again, which is the point. But yeah, so actually I'll show you, I can show you something though, as much as I can't show you code. I can show you how the music is played from the story. So I think we made a short on this a while back, but each story in the game, so each quest, when they have stories, each like question mark node, the story nodes, is one of these files, one of these node graphs. So if I open just like story 2, for example, you can see most of this is going to be text and visual events and other things, but these green ones, these are audio. Now for some reason this scene doesn't have atmosphere, but this is how you play audio. You can set the different music, you can set the different parameters to what you want, you can set the volume, and you can tell it to reset the party volume. That's relatively specific, but you know. I have other ones, so if I remember my shortcuts, actually I'll just do it this way. So here, for example, I can, there's quite a few Atmo ones because you want to do something to different things. I really like the Atmo end, all, and start event, which is the one I've used the most, which really simplifies a lot of the others, I'll be honest. All this does is you can give it an atmosphere, so like, I don't know, forest ambience, give it the volume, and then it will start all the atmospheres you give it and stop all the ones that you and start all the other ones that aren't in that list, basically. Wait, I think you're only sharing Unity at the moment. Oh no, it doesn't show the node graphs. Oh, that's annoying. Oh, we can't see the window opened. Oh, that's annoying. I wonder that it's still Unity though. Okay. Let me see if I can fix that. I don't know if I can, you know, it's because it's something. What? That's really weird. Okay, well I might have to do the age-old share my screen with you. Okay, my screen, beautiful. Okay, I was showing you this. Sorry, I didn't realize you couldn't see this. That's really weird. So I mean, this is, you know, this is Unity. I don't know why you couldn't see it, but well, I guess that's that. So this is what I was talking about. This is the music event. So you know, this is the song. This is the parameters. This is the value of the parameter. You can put it to anything you want. Then this is the volume, and then this is if you reset the party volume to 0. And as I said, you can have different audio stuff. This is all the different audio events you can do. Most of these are not used very often. But as I was saying, Atmo, Endo, and Start event is great. It will start all the events. It will stop all the Atmo events and start the ones you want, and it will not stop them if they're already in this list, if that makes sense. So I won't, you know, restart an event. So quite often I'll have the forest ambience somewhere. This is the volume of that atmosphere. The good thing with atmospheres is that 99% of the case you don't want to have any parameters on them. Actually, yeah, I do have an Atmos params event because apparently sometimes I have, but for most of the case, you don't really care. And I'll just quickly show you how SFX are done. So you can see like there's a lot for atmosphere, a lot for music, one for sound effects. They're easy. They're just like, hey, what sound effect do you want to play? I want to play smack. There you go. I want to play smack. Just plug it in. There you go. It'll play smack. That's it. That's all you have to do. Easy peasy. Alright, there you go. So that's how music is done in these graphs. I might try and find another example. What about story 9? Go on. Yeah, so here you can see this is exactly what I was talking about. You have a music character event. This is basically the same as the other music event, except that I can put the characters on directly here. It's just a simplification for me. And then here's it's going to play the forest ambient at a volume of 0.6. That's it. And then it also adds this background, actually, sorry, be careful cello reverb parameter to this music. So this is the suspense theme. Which I also quite like. It's one of my favorites, I think. So that's how the other stuff is done on this side. I can actually show you some of the code now because I mean we're on my screen now, so why not? This is the Visual Studios. Visual Studios, sure, a lot of you know what that is. It's just where you do code, basically. So yeah, these are all the musics. This is all the audio banks. I can't remember why this is used, but it's used. I did this a while ago in my defense. So yeah, so the audio handler for me is a singleton. I quite like singletons. I know people tend to not like singletons. Concerned about well the atmosphere's been fireball. Well, hopefully you didn't see what some of the other ones were. But yeah, I didn't quite remember that there was maybe some spoilers in there. So maybe avoid looking too much into that if you want to avoid spoilers. Or if you want a sneak peek of what sound effects you might get, then you can look at that list. But yeah, so I like singletons for things like this. So things that I know I'll definitely only need one, but I always need one. So the audio handler is great. I will always need an audio handler in every scene, everywhere. But I'll always need one, and I need it to always be the same one. So that's why I think singleton for this usage is basically what it's made for. I know quite a few people don't like singletons at all. I've heard people say on the internet, "Oh, you should never use them for anything. They're dangerous and they're bad." And I can kind of see why people say they're dangerous. Having a thing that inherently can be accessed by anywhere in the code, yep, that is a bit dangerous. But equally, it's really useful for things like this. So we tend to have, because I make a lot of the code, so we tend to have a couple of singletons. The very common ones are the audio handler and a game handler. So game handler is just for basically like save data, things like that, which are usually need to be accessed by so many different things that would be such a pain to do otherwise. Or just like ways to save, or ways to move between scenes, or things like that. Like just data that needs to be stored through object to object. I usually have a game handler singleton for that. But yeah, you can see I've got these different sections. I'll actually collapse the code. You'll never see Luke doing that. But I can collapse the code and you can see the names of the functions. So I've got a lot of play musics and they're all slightly different in various ways. And you can see this one's never used. Ooh, it can probably be removed. But you can see to an extent they're used for various things. I quite often when I have lots of these, it's just I mean here I've actually got 2 functions. Yeah. To be fair, I think all of these 4, I think all reference this one in the end. It's just like it will do certain things before there. As soon as you remove it, you'll need to use it. Quite likely, yeah. But I mean, that's probably why it hasn't been removed yet. It's just that fear. But yeah, but you can see, this is the play music section. This is the params section, and then this is some of the enumerators. They're coroutines. I think Luke has already talked about coroutines, but they're just ways of doing things over several frames. So for changing params smoothly, they can be quite useful. Now, actually, I will go back to FMod here. Beautiful. I have to remember that I'm just sharing my screen. But you can see that if I change a parameter, like the volume, you can see, okay, that didn't work. Okay, give me a second. I'm going to go back to my FMod. Ooh, FMod. I'm going to pause that, and I'm going to go on, start something. So, I think this will work this time. If I set this to 2, you'll notice there'll be an orange little bow above the number, that thing there, that goes from one to the other. And this is a fade in, so it fades in and fades out. So when you make these parameters in FMod, you can also set their seek speed. So that's the speed at which they'll go, like what speed they'll go from one number to the number you give it. So here it's 0.7 per second, so it will do 0.7 per second. So the 2 will take about 3 seconds to go from 0 to 2. But sometimes you want to be slower or more specific or faster. And in code, you can ignore that seek speed. So let me go back to my screen. So you can see here, I've got ignore seek speed, because you can just tell it to ignore the seek speed if you want. But it tends to be quite useful, the seek speed, because for most things, you wanted to always change at the same speed. But sometimes you wanted to change faster or slower, or etc. Music volume, I've just got stuff here. I quite like having this because quite often you want to play with that in certain ways. In this project, actually not as much. Out of Malagry, I was very, very often changing the volume of the music to try and like I liked having the silent scenes where something like really dramatic was happening and I just wanted to make it sit there. But I found it hasn't worked as well in this project when I've tried to do things like that. I think it's because it's, as I said earlier, it's more upbeat, it's more silly, and having that silence, it just feels kind of odd. Yeah, so you can see this is a whole bunch of functions. These are probably the most technical functions. So how FMod works is that you have these what they called, event instances, and you can see I have one music event instance, and this is just how you create the instance, and then it will try and start it, and then if it doesn't work, it will try and tell you why it didn't work. In this case, I'm also debugging the which banks have loaded, because if it hasn't worked, it's probably because the bank it was trying to play from hasn't loaded. At least that was the case when I changed the system to use several different banks. Banks are just what FMod builds, so FMod will build different banks, and for reasons I've got several. So you can see for music, I've got map music, Cressy music, main theme, and variations. And these banks allow me to not have all the music loaded at once, basically. But you can see I can also release the music instance and etc. And then we have an atmosphere section, which is just, hey, have some atmospheres, I guess. And you can see stop all Atmos. So again, a lot of functions. They all do what they say. But yes, I think that's. Oh yeah, this is just the main technical part. So bank handling. Little tangent here, but I find regions and these kind of like collapsing into definitions really useful in code, because it means I can structure things and I can hide things that I don't need to see right now, and I can find things way easier. Luke, on the other hand, he's not here to defend himself, so I'm really being mean doing this, but Luke, on the other hand, really dislikes these and doesn't even like collapsing to definition, for example, because he likes seeing all the code all the time. And I don't get it, because for me, like, I just get lost. There's too much code sometimes. You just want to narrow it down and like keep it to its own thing. I think he would do it sometimes, but I just think this is so. I know the music stuff is in here. I know the atmosphere stuff is in there. You can see another example of this is probably my settings handler, wherever it is. Or no, my settings menu, actually, sorry. My settings menu, you can ignore the setup, but, ooh, it's actually not. Oh, great, it's beautiful. Everything's in its own little section, it's great. And this is actually really nice because all of these functions are only, like, that, everything is encapsulated in a sense. Like, all of these are just that, all of this is just that. There's no funny business. It's great. Anyway, the settings menu is, as you can see, relatively painful to make because it's just a lot of different things that do similar but not quite the same things. So you have to make a lot of especially that Unity is weird with buttons, so sometimes you just have to make a bunch of functions that basically do pretty much the same thing. So like, for example, this. Why do I have to make this Unity? Why can't I just call this function? I don't know. You're so much more organized than me. Well, I don't know. I sometimes I like if things are organized, I can get to them. I know where they are. Now, you say that I am organized in a way that only I understand, which means that anybody else looking at my stuff tends to get quite confused. But also these headers, I learned that when I was on an internship. So good. I bet you name your files sensible things instead of key mashes too. I mean sometimes. Um, you're gonna get me on a rant about Unity being annoying with prefabs. Um, Sometimes I want to rename a class, and this happened today actually. So I'm gonna go on a little tangent here that I probably shouldn't, but I'll do anyway. And actually, I'll go back to my Unity scene. Um, I um, I Today how story works in our game. We have for the different characters we have entity. I think they're called entity animations. Is the class name, and they work with sprites and sprite renderers. Importantly, so they're not UI. They're in the like world. Not sure what to call stuff that isn't UI, but I'm going to call it they're in the world, which means that they work with sprite renderers. Now, because of how outposts work and how you get to the outpost stories, which actually I can probably show you. I was testing this out earlier, so um, it's work in progress, and this is just to test that the base system kind of works. We're very much at the very start, but the outpost stories, the characters basically have to be in UI space because all of this is UI, and they have to be in front and behind of UI things, which is really annoying to do if you're not all in UI. So here, if I add a story, it's a random guy here. If I press this button, this is a test button. If I press that button, you'll see he'll start talking, and that's kind of the how the outpost story is going to work. Is that you can press a button to get to this point, and then you can basically press probably on the character themselves to talk to them, and then once you finish, you get back to the main section. This will all be changed. It's all work in progress, but the functionality will be similar. Anyway, this guy is UI, but I still want him to have an entity animation because I want him to have eyes and expressions, and maybe even bob sometimes when he changes. If I want there to be availability for there to be different poses and things like that, even though currently there's nothing like that planned, just because I like planning for the future in that sense. If making I find the best thing to do when you make code is to make code that's easily changeable to what you might need that you don't know you'll need now. So things like that, just allowing them to have different poses, allowing them to have different expressions, is what I think is useful. The problem is that this is all UI, and I'm used to working with not UI for entity animations, which meant that I basically had to I could either rewrite the entire system to work with UI and just have a copy for UI and a copy for not UI, but that's annoying because it's a lot of rewriting the same code basically. Or I can make a parent class of the entity animation and then just have the basically have different things that can just call things to change the sprites, right? Because that's basically the main difference is, hey, to change a sprite, you need to go sprite renderer.sprite equals whatever sprite you want, and to change the sprite of an image, you need to go image.sprite equals whatever. But that's about it. It's basically the same thing behind. You might want to do a couple things with UI because UI is a little bit different, but pretty much it's the same. So I wanted to make my entity animation class. I wanted to rename it to entity animation world or something like that. But what you may not know is that if you rename or even change the directory it's in, like change the structure of mono behavior classes that you have on prefabs, the reference to that to that script, if it's no longer the same name or no longer even in the same directory, it can just sometimes vanish and be like, oh, the script is missing. And it's super annoying because it means that like either I have to keep the same name and then have a silly name like entity animation base for the parent class, or I have to go to every prefab that has this entity animation and reset it. And that is just so annoying when you have quite a few of them, like I do. Anyway, sorry, that's a random tangent on Unity and renaming classes that you have in mono behaviors. I wish it would just handle it because it's so annoying. Because sometimes you really do want to rename something, or like you want to restructure something. I discovered this when I restructured, when I went to, basically that's, yeah, you don't see too much spoilers in here. I restructured it when I basically put some of these story stuff. So I've got some of these story scripts for some of the random objects that you can find. And I just put them in a folder depending on which act they were in, or in like a general folder if they were in a general thing. Just because I was starting to get a lot of them and I wanted it restructured. And every one I moved, the script was missing and I had to reset it. It was so annoying. Anyway, sorry. Random tangent aside. I can't remember what I was talking about before, but that is oh yeah, organized file. I try and name things sensibly. I will say there's in one way where I'm definitely not very organized. I don't have any comments anywhere pretty much. I'm very bad at comments in my code. Also, I forget I can change my character. I think even when I'm not looking at OBS. Yeah. Aha. I don't have an annoyed face. Sad. Well, I can do that. There you go. I don't use comments. That's the face that we use. That usually that gets me. I mean, I feel like one of the reasons I don't use comments is because 90% of the time I feel like the function name describes what it does, but I agree that's not a very good excuse. I do sometimes use comments when it's really needed, or when I know it's going to be used by lots of different people. So a lot of the grglib, for example, is commented just because I feel like it should be. Ooh, yeah, let's go with that one. Anyway, that was a random tangent. I think I'll get past the tangent. I think to finish off this stream, I will show you one other thing that I've worked on in the last couple of weeks. So you may remember about 2 weeks ago, I think it was actually more like 3 weeks ago, we all came together and we were all just working on things in one of these streams. And Luke was working on, I think, some of the 3D stuff, if I'm not mistaken. And I was working on the Alchemist log. Got there. And at the time in the stream, I basically did nothing. I struggled to work and talk to stream at the same time, so I prioritized talking to you guys. But since then, I've had some time to do work, and you know, I've done a lot of the feedback from the beta, and I've done a lot of implementing some of the Act 3 stuff. I think I did that between times, and you know, I've had work to do, but I also had time to do some of the Alchemist log. So this is one of my save files. One of my playtest save files I've been doing to go through the game and test things. And you can see this is what the Alchemist log is going to look like, or at least what's currently looking like, and I think it's pretty close to being pretty good. And you can see this is kind of what I have here, so you can look at the different stats. I'll scale this up a little bit for you. It's going to be a little bit pixelated just because I'm scaling it up weirdly. But you can see like what's the average rewards, like what damage it does, what's the things, and there'll be a little description. This is just me writing a random description. It's only hostile that has a description because I haven't done the others. I might actually ask Luke to do a lot of these. But you can see it's kind of neat. It tells you what you get. It tells you what the hostile stats are. What weaknesses it has. If it has any traits, it'll also come up here. Though I might not show any of those. And similar with ingredients, you can go on an ingredient and it'll tell you, what it's used in, what's the cost, and what's it's shot by. So if you're like, oh, I really need, I don't know, I really need these. Okay, sometimes I should test these things before I go on stream. I really need these rose quartz. I wonder where they drop, where you can look and they will tell you where it drops. I'll probably order this in like, what's the highest average drop? So like the first one is the highest average, the second one is the next, etc. So yeah, so I quite like this. I'm planning on having 2 more sections, one for characters and one for potions. They're not made yet. The characters might not happen just because they're complicated. to do, and the potions will probably happen. Though it is possible that the Alchemist log won't release, like won't be in the version 1.0. It is possible that if we get delayed on other things, it's a bit of a stretch goal. So it's not something that is needed for the game to be finished. So it might be skipped if we don't have time. When I say be skipped, we'll get to it. It just might be released, in a future update instead of on release. Hopefully, I'm getting a little bit stressed. It's like a month to release now. I think we calculated to be basically exactly 4 weeks. I say exactly. Obviously, things can change, um, but it's basically 4 weeks until the end of March. So it has to be 4 weeks or less, basically. And yeah, stressful. I'm really hoping we finish on time, but I'm starting to realize that there's actually quite. There's not a lot to do, but there's also a lot to do. It's a lot of small things, and it becomes quite stressful when you're suddenly building up, and it's like, oh, things never finish. Anyway, how's the progress? It's good. So what I might show. So the main act has the main story is basically done. I'm waiting on a couple of assets to put things in, so that's kind of done. The outpost, the stories are written, and I started to, like, one of the things I was doing today was writing the system so I can start implementing those. I'm hoping they can be done relatively quickly. That's one of my biggest worries, is that actually there's more outpost stories than I thought there would be. And so getting all of those done, it might be a challenge, but also there's going to be significantly less animation in those stories, so they might go much quicker, which is what I'm hoping for. They also tend to be a little bit smaller, even though there's quite a few of them. So on that side, things are relatively small, relatively. That's where my worry really is the outpost, because the main story is just a matter of just adding some art stuff. I'm just playing through and making sure it works. The hostile side and like all the quest side, the final fight is not done, but that's, I think, the only thing that's not done. Um, but even that, it will take me not that long to make, because most of the systems for it are done. It's just I haven't set the stats, basically. That's about it. And then there's a couple of other very small things, like you may have noticed. Actually, I don't think you could. I'll go show. But we have birds in the map scene now. Now we only have one set of birds, but they have to be populated. Basically, there's a lot of small things that have to be done, but it's going well. It's just that it's getting close to release time, so it's getting stressed as well. Birds. You can thank Luke for those. He made those. But yeah, and we're quite happy. I honestly, we got less bugs from the. Oh, why is my car? You can zoom in or zoom. Like if you zoom in, you go slower, and if you zoom out, you go faster. The speed of your car is depending on your zoom. Uh, uh, so yeah, I recommend zooming out if you want to go faster. Um, we probably should make that more clear at some point, because I don't really think we mention it. I think it might be in the shortcut thing. Yeah, if you actually no, it's not even mentioned here. Never mind, it's just not mentioned. I've experienced that with this whole time. You can go faster. I should probably yeah, we should probably put that somewhere. Yeah, just somewhere actually. Um, but yes, zooming out makes you go faster. Zooming in makes you go slower. So if you want to, yeah, there you go. But yeah, yeah. So basically, progress-wise, we're pretty good. We're yeah, end of project, so obviously stressed. But yeah, I was saying we got less bugs than I expected in the in the beta, which I'm very happy about. Because quite often, the first time we release something, even vaguely publicly, we're like inundated with bugs that we have to fix. But it seems that our internal playtesting has got most of those already. And there's only a few things here and there that needed. There's a couple of big ones that we managed to somehow miss. The biggest one being the imp one that just kind of froze the screen, which was a relatively easy fix because it was just something was badly set somewhere. But yeah, there was slightly less than I expected. Obviously, it's going to be slightly more, and we're probably, like every project, there's probably something that's going to go wrong on day one, and then we're going to have to be panicking to solve it as quickly as possible. Because that's happened on most things we've done. The worst ones are actually on updates. I've had updates that have basically bricked games before. The very first game we ever released, one of our very first updates we did to it, if you didn't already have a save file, it would just crash on launch. And that was up for like a day, and I was dead. When somebody on the Steam community was like, "The game is crashing for some reason," I was like, "What?" And eventually figured it out quite quickly, but it was very stressful. But I'm babbling on a bit. I apologize, but yeah, game's going well. I really hope we don't have to delay it. I think we'll be good. It is possible that certain things won't be in, like certain small features, like the alchemy log might not be in time. But if they are, we'll crack it out in an update soon after. But yeah, I think unless people have any questions, I might end it here. I hope you've enjoyed the music stream. Actually, talking of music stream, let me play some music. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the music stream. I hope you've enjoyed learning a bit more about how the music in my project Alchemist was made, and like how FMod side of stuff works and how that's implemented on my side, on the Unity side. And yeah, I hope my ramblings were understandable to some of you. Hell yeah. And I'll see you all next week probably, which might actually be my last stream for a while, sadly, because I'm going to be heading off after next week for quite a long time. But you'll get streams weekly still with Luke and Lydia. But I might just be gone for a bit. But I'll still be working in the background. That's not gonna be an issue. But anyway, thanks to you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.